In this video, I introduce the life of the Buddha, and I will connect it to addiction and the treatment of depression. So this is a story that I often tell my clients. I introduce to them the story of the Buddha to help them understand and gain insight into their own suffering. If you like this content, it'd be good if you would like the video or subscribe to my channel, to give a comment. That will help the video reach more people. Okay, so the Buddha, aka also known as Siddhartha, was born 2,500 years ago in India. And when he was born, shortly after his birth, his mother, from complications related to birth, she died. Now, in today's language, we would call this a trauma. And certainly in my therapy office, I often meet people who have experienced very early developmental trauma, whether it's from the death of a parent or a separation of parents. Often I meet clients who have been adopted shortly after their birth. And it has an impact on a person's life, consciously or unconsciously. It continues to impact their life throughout. So when Siddhartha was born, his father, Siddhartha was born into a royal household, at least that's how the story goes. And his father, the king, invited a fortune teller to come and look at Siddhartha and to divine his future. And this fortune teller who came, he told the king that Siddhartha, he would either be a successful leader, or he would become a holy man. Now, if you've ever been to India, I've been there a couple of times, the thought of your child becoming a holy person is terrifying, that they would become a sadhu, they would go and live in the forest, they would become a wandering yogi. It is a terrifying thought. It's not an easy life. It's a wild life at times. And also Siddhartha, he wasn't from the Brahmin caste, so he wouldn't be going, as a holy man, he wouldn't be going to the temple. He would be going into the forest, and the forests in India are pretty scary places. So Siddhartha, the king, he received this fortune from this soothsayer, saying that his son would either become a holy person or a great leader. And the thought of his son becoming a holy man terrified him. So the king created this kind of artificial world around Siddhartha, removing anything that would disturb his experience, and that would drive him towards the life of a holy person, an ascetic or a monk. So the young Siddhartha was surrounded in beauty, in music, in perfume, he was surrounded by beautiful people, by pleasures, and in an attempt to protect him, or to stop him from pursuing this monastic life. And it was like his life was this virtual Truman Show, this artificial environment. And it wasn't sustainable. So Siddhartha, he lived in this world of pleasure, of hedonism, and anybody who was old or who was sick or dying, they were removed from view. So when Siddhartha is 29 years old, he's traveling between the sort of winter and the summer palace, and as always, his father would manicure the journey between the palaces. and he would remove anything from sight that would disturb Siddhartha's view, that would, that would spur him towards a monastic or ascetic life. So Siddhartha's traveling between the palaces, and out of the corner of his eye, he catches sight of an old person. And this vision is completely shocking to Siddhartha. He's never, at the age of 29, he's never seen an old person before. So he climbs down from his carriage, and he goes beyond this manicured presentation, and he sees the old person, and the next thing he sees a sick person, and then he sees a dead person. So this image, this sudden image of something that he's never seen before, is traumatic. It's traumatizing to Siddhartha. He cannot believe what he is saying, and in that moment he realizes that this too will happen to him, that he will get old, he will get sick, and he will die. And there's a feeling of humiliation, the humiliation of his own flesh. Like, he now looks at himself, and where he sees youth, now he sees aging. Where he sees beauty, he now sees decay. Where he sees, brown hair, he now sees gray hairs. And, at the age of 29, I guess we all have to come to terms somewhat with this realization. This is when the sense of our own mortality begins to squeeze into our lives. We start to see the aging. It's undeniable. We start to get a sense of our own aging, our own illness, our own death, and our own mortality. So Siddhartha, in seeing these images, he has this terror, this trauma, this fear, and he sees a fourth sight, a fourth thing. He sees a monk who is somewhat looks serene and at peace, and he thinks to himself, I will have to go on this journey of the yogi, of an ascetic, to find my own peace of mind. In the midst of all of this transience, impermanence, and death, and aging, at least this monk, this wandering ascetic, at least he has some part of him that seems calm and at peace. So he makes this decision to leave the royal household. And at this stage, he already has a child. The child is 1 week old. And he looks at the child and the sleeping mother, and he decides to escape or he flees the palace. Now, it's interesting because what we see here is Siddhartha kind of reenacting something that happened to him as a 1 week old baby. His mother dies, she leaves him, he's somewhat traumatized by this. And certainly in my work as a trauma therapist, I would recognize that is a trauma. And now he is repeating the same behavior to his own child. And I find that interesting and very kind of typical in work as a therapist, that these patterns get handed down from one generation to the next. Okay, so Siddhartha, he escapes the palace, and because he's not from the Brahmin caste, he can't go to the temple, which would be a nice place to go. He has to go into the forest, and the forest is terrifying, wild. He hooks up with some yogis, and he starts to learn their yogic disciplines, their meditative practices, and he's really working at learning and mastering these practices. So he spends 6 years practice in these intense disciplines. he's racking his body with pain. You can read the accounts of, doing practices where he's holding his breath and they are extremely painful. He's engaging in very intense meditation disciplines, and he's starving. He's emaciated. He's living as an ascetic, and he is, I think if I remember it, he's living on 1 grain of rice a day, and just enough to keep him alive. And there's these beautiful accounts of the of Siddhartha's body, these beautiful accounts of how emaciated his body has become. He talks about his spine becoming like corded beads. He talks about his arms becoming like stalks of bamboo. And it's, if you touch his belly, you can feel his spine. His rib cage is like the roof of a barn where all the tiles and shingles have fallen off the roof and you just have the beams. And, if he puts his hand through his hair falls out. If he goes to the toilet, he lands. He's so weak, he falls in his own feces. He's completely exhausted. His energy is spent, and he's on death's door. When people look at him, they think he's already dead. He's so emaciated and so covered in filth. And he's on death's door. He's ready to give up. And so he's 35 years old. And it's interesting because he's had this first 29 years of his life, which has been all about pain or pleasure, sorry. It's all about hedonism and pleasure. And then he has this 6-year period of mortification of the flesh, of pain, of demanding practices, of asceticism, but neither has brought any peace of mind. He's still suffering. He's still having this existential anxiety that he is unable to shake off. And he's ready to give up. And at the moment when he's ready to give up, he has this memory of something that happened to him when he was 12 years old. And he remembers this experience of seeing farmers plowing a field. And as the earth is being turned over by the farmer, the birds come down to feed on the worms. And he finds this image distressing. And he remembers how he sat down underneath a tree and he began to watch his breath. And that this simple practice of paying attention to his breath, how this had a bigger impact upon his despair and his stress and anxiety than anything else that he had done. So he makes this commitment that he will sit down and he won't get up either until he has died or that he has, figured out this problem of his own suffering. So he sits down to meditate, and the stories go he sits there for 7 days or 49 days. And he sits and he sits and he sits. He goes into deeper meditative states. He sees his own mind with more and more clarity. As he's sitting there, his own subconscious starts to invade, as it does for all of us. And he gets this thought such as, you're disappointing your parents. You had a job in this life. You were supposed to be the prince, the king. And instead, look at you living in this forest, like a poor man, emaciated. And he sits there, he stays there, he doesn't get up. He's able to work through that deep pattern of distress that's, affecting his mind. And then he has thoughts like he's supposed to be a great ruler, a great king, sort of appealing to his ego. You're not supposed to be this poor wandering ascetic. You're supposed to have this life of pleasure, of abundance, of people respecting you, people worshiping and adoring you. And he sits with that. He doesn't get up. He sits still. And he has other thoughts about enjoying life, the beauty, the pleasure that he can have access to, the things that trap all of us in many ways. And he stays seated. He continues to watch his breath. So at a certain point, he's gone deeper into meditation, and he has this moment of eureka, of insight, of seeing something that he hasn't seen before. And it's this moment when he's no longer Siddhartha, he becomes the Buddha. And the word Buddha, it means to be awake. It's as if a person was sleeping and now they have woken up. They are now the Buddha. They've seen something that wasn't seen before. He's become free of suffering. So what was that? What is it that he woken up to? Well, he sits there, he sort of mulls it over in his head, he tries to figure it out. What is this? What is this transformation? What have I learned? What is this eureka moment that has changed my experience of the world? And, can I teach it? Can I formulate it and offer this to others? And he develops this teaching, which is really the most important teaching in the Buddhist tradition of the Four Truths. And it's based on a medical model. And he sort of organizes his thoughts, his teaching, and he begins to teach this, what he learned in his awakening. So he starts with the first truth. What is the first truth? Well, he sees that there is a qualitative difference between pain versus suffering. He understands that pain is inevitable in people's lives, that he has felt a lot of pain in his life. The death of his mother is a very painful event. The abandoning his own son, very painful, and all of the other experiences which he had in his life. And he recognizes that these pains, what he describes as pain, is unavoidable. It's part of the human condition. Everything that is born must die, and in the process get old and sick. And so there's an inevitability that is for all of us, that we feel pain. And in my therapy office, some people have extremely painful lives. Other people have more lucky, more gilded existences. But certainly there is a lot of pain to go around. So Siddhartha, or the Buddha, he sees that pain is inevitable. It's not optional in people's lives. It's a primary experience. Your loved one dies, it's painful. But he recognizes suffering as a secondary experience, an optional experience that is avoidable. That's, and that secondary experience is that it's the voice inside of us that says, it shouldn't be this way. This should not have happened. My mother should not have died. Why my mother? Why not somebody else's mother? Why does it always happen to me? And that's basically the difference. It's seeing the difference between pain and suffering. And this is an important realization, and he uses this medical model to explain it. So let's take a look at the medical model. It has 4 parts. The first part is, let's take an example, maybe lung cancer, for example. So you go to the doctor, and the first part is diagnosing the disease. Okay, you have lung cancer. The second part is, what causes this disease? Well, the cause is smoking, lifestyle. The third part, what does health look like? Well, it looks like someone who doesn't have lung cancer. And the fourth part is the prescription. Well, the prescription would be chemotherapy, lifestyle changes, stop smoking, maybe surgery. And that is how you return to health. Okay, how you you realize health. So the Buddha, he takes this model, he applies it to the human condition. And he says, first thing to identify is that human beings suffer and that it is optional. It's a secondary experience. Pain is primary, suffering is secondary, pain is unavoidable, suffering is optional. The second thing, what is the cause of the suffering? And he recognizes the cause is reactivity, or the word that's used is clinging. But reactivity can be a much more, for us, maybe in our language, we can understand it a bit more. But the word that's used is cling, or tanha, to cling. And it means that we try to push away the things that we don't like. We don't like that we get old. We don't like that we get sick. We don't like that our loved ones die. We don't like the difficult things that happen to us. We try to push those away, and we try to hold on to the things that we want. We try to hold on to youth. We try to hold on to the parts of our life that we like. We try to hold on to, I think ultimately it's we try to hold on to our youth, and we don't want to get old. We don't want to get sick. We don't want to die. We want things to be a certain way. So it's this double-edged sword, or two sides of the same coin, reactivity. We're trying to avoid and push away what we don't like, and we're clinging to the things that we do like. And this is the mechanism that causes our suffering. And the vision, the third part, what's the vision for health for a person who doesn't suffer? Well, that would be, a person who doesn't react. So the healthy person, somebody who doesn't suffer, would be a person who doesn't react, who doesn't push away what they want to avoid, and doesn't cling on to what they can't let go of. And that is the vision for the healthy person. Now and then the fourth, what is the prescription? Well, then the prescription has three parts. The first part is ethics. The second part is mindfulness. And the third part is insight. Okay? So the Buddha, he taught this four truths. And he taught this, he was 35 years old. His teaching began then, and it goes on until he's 80 years old. So he has a 45-year teaching career. And within that, he was teaching ethics, mindfulness, and insight. And this became his teaching that he would return to over and over. Ethics for me is it's something that's very alive in us. Within my experience of the world, how can I act? How can I live that is in harmony, that doesn't create a lot of disturbance in my mind? How do I live a life that is in accordance with my own ethics? So it's something that's alive, it's evolving all of the time. It's not like a moral commandments that are placed upon me. It's more something that is human or internal within me and evolving and alive. Then mindfulness is this practice that we can really work with that reactivity. I have a meditation practice. I sit down on my cushion. I pay attention to my breath. I pay attention to the emotions that arise, the thoughts, the difficult thoughts, the pain in my body. And I get this experiential knowing, this journey that I've been on for 27 years of becoming friendly with what is difficult in my life, trying not to avoid and push away what I don't like, and also working with desire, that I'm not holding on too tight to the things that I do like. And that has been a journey for me that I do daily. I do it with my clients when I see them every day, and teaching them to really work with these internal patterns of avoidance and desire that they have, and reactivity. And it's very practical, getting somebody to feel the pain in their body, pain in their hip, their shoulder, their head, their migraine, their, all of these different pains that are there, getting them to feel those and become open to them, to become curious about them, to not be judging them, to cultivate friendliness, to work with this reactivity, to work with old painful thoughts and memories and patterns of mind that are keeping a person locked in their suffering. So mindfulness is very important when working with depression, with addiction, because it really helps to have a deep internal transformation of a person's experience. And then insight is about seeing the world in ways that we haven't seen before. So it's like those moments of eureka, those moments, light bulb moments. For example, a light bulb moment of recognizing the difference between pain and suffering, that these are not the same thing, that one is optional and one is unavoidable. And these are the moments of insight that come through stillness, through engaging with these contemplative teachings, through the practice of mindfulness and meditation. And they develop over weeks, months, years, decades, and we become more understanding of the practices, or more understanding of our own human condition and our suffering and the suffering of others. So that's basically the teachings, the Buddha's teachings in a nutshell. The Buddha recommended people practice mindfulness. He came back to this teaching over and over. This is something I teach with my clients in therapy. And it is deeply transformative at changing, not just on a knowledge basis, not just cognitively, but our energy body, our emotional body, our reactivity, our patterns, our memory patterns, our emotional patterns, all of these patterns that are keeping us locked into cycles of suffering. So this is where the teaching of the Buddha is so wonderful, so helpful in helping people to understand their own existential suffering, their own human condition. The Buddha taught for 45 years. He died at the age of 80. And he died, there's a lot of confusion over how he died, but he, in the texts, he died from, he was something called pork delight, which could be meatballs, so he wasn't a vegetarian. I always find that interesting, that piece. Or it could have been truffles, what the pigs delight in eating. But it was basically, he died of dysentery after a 45-year teaching journey. And I think having some understanding of the Buddha's life and his own suffering, his own journey, his own healing of his own trauma, his pain, his existential angst that all of us suffer and go through, it really helps us to understand our own human condition and our own potential to be free, because his DNA, his flesh, his body is the same as mine. And, he was called the Buddha because he was free from his suffering. He was awakened to the human condition and he was able to become free of suffering. Not free from pain, he experienced pain in his life, but free from suffering. And it's the very same potential that each of us have for our own transformation. That's why I work as a therapist. That's why I continue on this path of my own therapy, of mindfulness, of meditation, compassion practices, breath awareness practices. And it's why I support others in this journey, because it's really deeply transformative. And it's not just happening here in our minds. It's about a shift in our heart. It's about knowing this in the body, in the flesh, in a deep way. And that is really done through mindfulness. I'll leave one other image or two images. The image of the mindfulness meditator. It's often the image of an artisan, like a carpenter. And it's something that skill is developed over time. A new carpenter, if they make a chair or a table, the thing's all wonky, it falls apart. But over time, they become more skilled and it becomes more beautiful and honed. And mindfulness is a bit like that. The more we do it, the more experience we get, we become skilled. And the other image is the image of a gardener and what we cultivate, what we pay attention to. And, as we pay attention to certain aspects of our experience of harmonious, balanced, kind, loving, compassionate, non-judgmental, non-reactive aspects of our experience, those qualities grow, they're cultivated. Whereas the qualities that are jealous, anger, judging, those qualities atrophy, they fall away. So that's the journey that we're on. It's deeply transformative. Again, I don't know how people manage without doing something like this in their life. And it can really support you in your life, in your transformation, and to become a little bit more happy, easy, joyful, and free from suffering. Thank you.